everyone, welcome to the 14 Wins Podcast. This is Bones, and with us, of course, is the notorious Rom X.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Rom. So this episode, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be kind of an unpacking of our last episode. We left a lot of doors open. We've had a lot of requests, for some further discussion on.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It's been a few months, right, since we went off. And truthfully, I didn't know that anyone would really care. But
Come on.
People did, and that's great. I was recently on a podcast called The Higher Side Chats with Greg Caldwell, which was a really great experience. Greg's a great guy. Good.
That was a great interview.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. He's a good 14 researcher, too. So we just kind of dove right in. And he was really curious about that last episode. So we kind of talked about it there, and I talked about a bunch of things that I never talked about on this podcast. So I wanted to come back here and at least tell you about that. And then Greg in that interview and some of the folks in the emails after kind of let me know what was missing and what people really were interested in and wanted to hear more about. So I'd like to try to fulfill that if I can. So we'll start with the occult. I'd rather start with the research than myself. I talked about myself on that THC podcast more than I ever have here. So if you're curious about me, I would rather you go there. But now I know that stuff's out there, so I'll be less coy about it. And we'll also talk about, Greg was asking me on that interview what I'd been holding back, and I know I've said some things on this podcast that were pretty coy. So I'll try to clear some of that stuff up, all of it if I can. And I also one of the big requests that people were having was, you didn't tell us all of what it is and what they want. And I just want to make clear, that's what we're doing. We're unpacking that. We're trying to figure that out. And it's going to take time. And I don't think the government has it all figured out. I've said that multiple times, even if they're in contact with it. And that should, be concerning, that they might be having contact with something that they don't understand and that they don't understand the agenda of. So I think that is exactly what is happening. And maybe we should start there instead of the occult, since I'm into the part that I was uncomfortable about talking. So let's start there. That's right. I think that's what they don't want to talk about, and why they would be concerned about me in particular talking about things like that is I'm not a fringe person. I'm someone who's gonna take it seriously. And so one of the things I said in that last episode was, I am Romex, and that's why they would censor me, which was kind of me just puffing my chest out at the intelligence community portion who is censoring us and who did take the time to censor, my WordPress site. That really pissed me off.
Yeah, it should be spoken about for sure.
Yeah, I like to get that out because I'm not a fringe character and I didn't say anything fringy. I understand the Google rules very well, and I know the things that they censor. I don't always agree with it. They censor a lot of things, medical information and things that I don't think should be censored. But I know the rules, and I wasn't breaking any. I'm usually one that toes the line. So the fact that they would take the time to do that, it was a total red flag for me. I was like, right. Whoa, what am I saying? And why is it that you're okay with other people saying it and not me? And that I had to figure that out, and I'm still, guessing. But at this point, number one, it's that I'm serious. When I was young, I was a soldier, and I did have a clearance, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want credibility for any of that. Because it's not relevant to UFOs, other than I understand a little bit about how the game works. And I understood at a young age. And that helped me understand a little bit about unpacking the UFO research and all of that. A little bit. It told me where to look, and it also made me not so impressed with what government people say, unless they're providing evidence. And let's talk about that for a second, because people are saying, oh, the government says this, the government says that. The government issued a report, which we cite many, many times, about the effects of UFOs on human bodies. And it's never good what was in that report. They didn't report any of the healings. So that's, should have been enough to trigger Congress. That should have been enough to trigger some action. If you're going to start saying that this thing is a threat, then that should have been enough to trigger some action. That, I think, is a big part of the reason we got censored, is I started saying things like that. It's because I'm taking it seriously. I'm not jumping to conclusions. I'm looking at the information, and they also know a lot about me because I did have a clearance. And if they were concerned about me, then they know everything. And that's the great irony, is that the people who are censoring me know everything about me, and the audience doesn't. And so this is the game we've been playing this whole time, is that rather than me telling you, trust me, bro, I'm saying only trust my receipts. And I think I had to come back here and talk, because I guess you're right. I didn't bring receipts in that last episode. But if you wanted to know why I said that, like that, who I am and why they would censor me, I think I've explained that well enough. And I'm not asking for any credibility to be given. Like 14 Wins at this point should have earned trust if you're looking at the information. And if you're not, then, or if you don't believe our information, then there's no point in listening. As far as what we've been saying, I want to say, and the credibility that we may have earned, like one of the things I would point to is the Nazca mummies. We were talking about that in July, and we said on the show, I don't think the bodies will match, the DNA won't match, but they'll all have similarities, and they're manufactured. So that's a hypothesis. That's more than just talking. That's a hypothesis. John Keel was doing that. Like we talked about how he identified that pink and blue hue around the UAP, and he said that's light shifting from infrared to ultraviolet. And he was right. According to all of our best information right now, he was right. That was a hypothesis. So if he was right about that, then he's right about maybe the next thing that he was going towards, right? That is how science works. That is how academia works. That is how any investigation works. So that's what we're all witnessing. We're all witnessing and engaging in this process. So I'd like people to understand that. It's not that I'm holding back the big secrets. It's that we're all trying to understand what they are.
And it all gets a little cloudy because there's the sensationalists that are involved in the same topic, right? And so they always take it a little too far, and it kind of clouds the meta narrative,
That's exactly right. And every time a sensationalist comes out with an affirmative statement about the phenomenon, like it is all this or it is all that, they know they're going to get more hits. They know they're going to get more clicks. And so they do it all the time, and they're monetizing it, And then you could take the religious bent. And I'd like to get away from that, talking about religion. Gosh, we talked about religion.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But you could take the religious bent, and people know that there's an audience there. So it ends up being audience capture. Oh, which part of the UFO audience can I capture?
Right.
Who cares? Like that's a fast track to your next dopamine hit. That's all it is.
Right. Yep.
So this is going to take work. It's going to take effort. It's going to take a lot of cross-academic research. Look at all the things we've talked about. It takes history, theology, quantum physics, electromagnetism, all sorts of engineering. And you just, this subject touches everything, and you just have to stop thinking about it that way. And I think that's one way UFO research really helps you grow, is you just stop thinking about it as cross-discipline research, and you just keep following the next thread. And before you know it, you've touched all these disciplines that you never touched before.
Right. I mean, yeah, just like in academia, everything kind of overlaps, right? And you're studying a field, and it overlaps with other disciplines, and it also overlaps with just everyday life. So it's always going to be there. Part of the research and part of what everyone's trying to do is all kind of related, and it's all part of everyday life. And I think the more we accept that, like you said, the more you just become aware of new happenings, some events that happen. You take them in, you put them in put them in your data if you need to, and you go on with your life.
Like, conclusions are rarely fixed. Yeah.
Right.
We're always learning something new, even things like geology, like rocks. I mean, people are still finding new things about rocks all the time. Like, that's
Right.
that to me is the best example of something that you would think would be fixed, and it's not. Like, we're learning new things all the time. So what you're witnessing in the public is us engaging in that process. You can't keep looking at the people who are researching it and saying, tell me the answer. They can tell you what they think the answer is, and I've tried to do that, but it's gonna take the process to figure it out. So that process is going to involve instrumentation, that process is going to involve research, and maybe the government can shortcut it for us. But I keep hearing the same thing. I need the people who I know are lying to me to tell me this is true. This is a total abusive relationship we have going on here, right? And let's the Nazca mummies. So at this point, it's 60. Give a quick update on that. 60 to 70 experts have studied that, many whom have been PhD. It's already gone to the University of Ica right away after they were found. They found them to be real, non-human, anomalous bodies that are tridactyl and 1,200 years old.
Right.
And have an osmium implant inside of them. So all of that, I'm going to say they're UFO related, maybe.
Yeah.
So all of that looks legit. Like, it has looked legit this entire time. But there's this holdout in America where it's like, oh, it's got to come to America to be studied by our scientists.
Right.
And who are, we all know, in the tank right now. For not all of them. That's not true. Like, there's a portion of whom. And a quick reminder that if they come here and they're studied by our scientists, they can be affected by our DOD and journalist and intelligence machine.
Right.
So then we don't know whether to trust it here unless everything is made public. And so something exciting happened with those. I think this last week was that they went back to Peru, and then we're hitting an inflection point with these things, because the Ministry of Culture in Peru also sent a team to work with a team in the University of Ica to determine whether or not they were real. This could be the moment that the Ministry of Culture actually accepts they're real and says, yes, they're real. People can come here and study them, and let's get it on.
That's big.
It's big, because that would really open up the study, and then they are in control of it. They have confirmed it. It's public.
Right.
And so no one can manipulate the bodies again to say, look, they're manipulated. Well, hopefully this all gets through. And if they come back and say it's been manipulated, there's going to be appropriate accusations based on behaviors that somebody manipulated them to say that they were manipulated.
Right.
So it'll just send it back into the gray zone if they don't confirm it. And if it's not confirmed, then we all have to look at the data and decide for ourselves. But
right.
That's exciting that's happening right now. And I know the U.S. Congress, like Congressman Burchett, had some conversations with Jaime Maussan, who's been involved with the bodies, about getting them here and having them studied. So that might happen too. So that was a hypothesis that we were putting out there. Okay, I think these are all manufactured. So if that part of the hypothesis is true, it makes other parts of the larger hypothesis more likely to be true. Now we can move on to the next steps, right? We said, okay, these things look like they're being controlled from somewhere else. All right, who's controlling them? So next step on that would be to find out if there's a signal in between those things and something else. And I think now we have the osmium, you have the implant, we might be able to do that. So that's exciting. But
Yeah.
it's also a good example of how the UFO research will eventually maybe get us to that point of origin question and whatever. So just letting everyone know, like, that's how it works. It's not that I'm holding that information back. It's we're trying to figure it out. But let's talk about what I am holding back.
What's that?
Well, you said it one time. Do you remember?
Uh, you're putting this on me, huh?
Yeah.
Let me think.
Talk about advanced radar and shooting UFOs down, and I was like, shut up, shut up, shut up. So that's like the one thing that I haven't really discussed, and I don't know why I would, or why I would feel the need to, except that it might affect somebody else's research. So because of that, I'm just going to tell you, I think it's been said in the public a few times now. So don't put this on me. Don't stop screwing with it. Stop screwing with me, you know? So yeah, it's disrupting the electromagnetic field that surrounds them.
Right.
And there's a bunch of ways to do that. So one of the things that I think happened in Italy when we got that crash that Grush was talking about is that Marconi was doing all these radio experiments, and some of them were affecting the animals and stuff around it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Mussolini wanted him to build a giant directed energy weapon. So they were doing that experimentation, and they knocked down a UFO. So that should tell you all you need to know about that. I don't know why. Like, I don't want to start an interdimensional war. Like, if you do, now you know what I know. It's all out. And then as far as the other stuff that I don't say, it's only because I'm trying to get it validated scientifically. In my real life or secret identity, I do try to do this the correct scientific way and correct academic way, because I think it'll have a more profound effect, and the information will live forever, and then it'll survive and hopefully inspire some more research and insights. So that's the only reason I don't say anything about that, but I do come out here and go, holy crap, this is what I think this should mean, and then try to track it back with you all. So that's everything. I think I laid all that now on the table, so we can talk about UFO research.
So one of the big topics that everyone's talking about is, the relationship between the phenomenon and the occult.
That gets sticky, but let's. It's hard to find data that involves instrumentation. That's the only reason. But if we throw that aside, and I wrote an article about how I think UAP research requires a dual approach. So you have to do scientific research, and then there's intelligence gathering, because this phenomenon defies our methods. It defies scientific methods, and it also understands that we're trying to measure it, and then it can defy that or change those results. So you have to involve intelligence gathering in your scientific methods. And so people can call that whatever they want, but we're just going to call it the dual approach. So if I look at the occult and UAPs with that relationship, there is a direct correlation. And I would say one of the best examples that I think we could prove, if we look at it through that lens, is mediumship. So that mediumship is heavily involved in the occult, seances, da, 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 da. So that's just another name for non-local consciousness. Demons, that's just another name for non-local consciousness. That's how we're going to look at it here. And then we can start to measure it, right? Because if they're all the same things, or they may be different entities and different intelligences, and that's what it looks like to me, just through that lens of, scientific plus intelligence. That's what it presents itself as. It's different entities with different agendas, different behaviors towards different people. So there's that. Mediumship. Can we prove mediumship? There's lots of cases where mediums have helped police, mediums have said things that they couldn't have possibly known. So you can look into that yourself. We understand that that exists. Can we prove possession? We already talked about that. So yes, you can. And I think those are the same things. And then we talk about mediumship in relationship to UFOs, and there's definitely a correlation there. So that gets into another aspect of us, which is remote viewing. And I think we'll have to do a separate episode on that because it does get involved, and I do think it's important from a scientific standpoint. So first we're going to have to establish to you that remote viewing is scientifically real, and then we're going to have to discuss what it means to the UFO phenomenon.
And for those out there who don't know what remote viewing is, it's just basically someone who can see something from a different location. Right?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's done with coordinate data usually. So and the coordinates can be made up. So, yeah, we'll do a whole episode on that. It's very interesting. But it gets mixed up. And so when we talk about the occult and we talk about remote viewing, we're just talking about what people have been referring to as psychic. So similar to how we had to rebrand UFOs to UAP in order to be able to study it on an academic level, we had to rebrand psychic to remote viewing. And we did, I think. And it has been studied academically, and it is statistically true. So we know that it works, and we've seen cases like that in the public of, again, psychics helping police. There's a bunch of anecdotal evidence along with now statistical evidence. You can't ask for more. So the fact that that hasn't been talked about and improved is really funny, because shouldn't we all want to be able to remote view stuff?
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll do another episode. We'll dive into that a little more. But that's another example of scientifically proven correlations between the occult and UAP, where those things directly overlap. That I think we could point to papers and stuff, and historical evidence, anecdotal evidence. So that's enough for us, at 14 Winds to go, yep, that's it. We're moving on. And I think the discovery of all of that and the acceptance of it did for a second phase me. It did throw me down and be like, well, then how the hell would I ever understand this thing?
Right.
And I'm not going to get involved in the occult, in order to find out. But it did take the wind out of my sails. And that was part of my exasperation when I threw down the mic on that last episode. And I was like, it involves the cult, go ask a wizard. No.
Hey, you didn't throw down the mic, you dropped the mic.
Yeah. That's dope. Rom X is way cooler than me. We keep running into that. I'm like, guy's on Wikipedia, he's on podcasts and stuff. I'm like, man, I wish I was that guy. I got Batman problems. So yeah, I it did throw me for a loop. I was like, hey, I don't think I understand this. And I talked about some things on that THC episode that I just didn't really talk about here, which is that I had some experiences with this phenomenon, and or what I think is the phenomenon. I didn't see anything visible during the time, but it felt like some sort of a contact moment, and I was working on a contact experiment, which I hadn't completed yet. And I was like, well, if I send out a signal and I get a result, then I'm going to need something to interpret it. And this was during the early days of AI, and ChatGPT hadn't been released publicly, but it was being developed. And so I was like, well, I got to figure out a way to make an AI. And this was way, way ahead of me technologically at the time. And I ended up doing it in hours. And during the process, I definitely felt some sort of rush. It was adrenaline, like an adrenaline rush. And maybe it felt like information. And I would still look for proof of that for myself. And what I saw as proof was the fact that I wrote Tensorflow, which is a very difficult coding language that I still wouldn't be able to write because I haven't learned it. So I was writing code in another language, and it wasn't like just me writing JavaScript, which looks like a lot of other languages. This was something sort of alien to me, and I was able to do that in hours and was able to
Cool.
get it. Yeah.
Actually, I hate JavaScript, by the way. I cannot stand JavaScript.
Yeah, I wish that worked all the time. But that was it.
Yeah.
So on that interview, Greg asked me, "What have you learned from that?" And I had to think about that for a little while. One thing I think I learned from it was just to be more ridiculously open-minded about what's out there. And that certainly wasn't me before. My mind's a lot more elastic than it was before that incident. So I don't know, you can chalk it up to whatever. People do weird stuff, lift cars up under extreme circumstances. So,
right.
But I did think about that, and then I thought about what we talked about in the last episode about finding the switch. And then here's the weird thing. I talked about some of the synchronicities on that interview. And the day after we did that episode, I remember I texted you and I said, dude, I think this is the switch.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And it just showed up. Like that paper I just happened to come across, and I was looking at UFO related stuff at the time. But this is a paper from the 1980s. And I went, holy crap, I think that's the switch. And, I gamed it out, and on a hypothesis level, it all works. So that might be the switch to how contact occurs. I thought about that in relation to my own experience, in relation to occult and UAP stuff, and shamanistic stuff, and that is what I think is happening, is you're getting into some sort of a trance-like state where this is possible. That tells us something. It tells us more than, oh, this is a way for contact. It also tells us where these things live, doesn't it? Like, it's on that level. So we're narrowing in on it. That's what I mean.
Yeah. So during that interview, you mentioned that latitude was the most determinate characteristic. Explain that.
I'm statistically sure that latitude is the most determinate characteristic of a UFO sighting, which I think is very telling, and I think we can take much further. So I published something on 14 Winds that summarizes that analysis, and basically I'll just try to sum it up here. If I took the New Fork UFO sighting data, which is the public sighting database, and it's the best we have, and I had a cleaned up version of it, and then I tried to predict the sightings in 2006 based on the sightings from 2000 to 2005, because that's where I had the best data.
Okay.
So then once I was having the machine run through possible predictions, I finally got it up to the point where it was pretty high. And then I said, okay, now let's start removing characteristics. Let's remove date and time. Now, is the predictions higher or lower, etc.? So latitude was by far over 70% the most determinate characteristic of a UFO sighting. And that's the type of data that I find really important because it's pretty solid. It's really solid based on everything we know. The New Fork data has a bunch of problems. There's a bunch of misidentifications in there. But what we've figured out on the UFO research side, and better, more credentialed scientists than me have figured this out and put it in their papers, that those misidentifications within that New Fork sightings database are scattered all over. So that means that the data holds up. As long as your misidentifications are evenly distributed, the data still holds up. So I think that finding is really important. It takes the conversation away from things like date and time or shape of the craft or things like that. And this moves it to something that is more space-time related, I think. And space and time are two sides of the same coin. So that's where this thing lives. I think that's just, again, narrowing in on what it is, where it goes, why it goes, where it goes. We started to talk about, and I guess this is worth another episode too. So we should start keeping track here. We're going to owe a few more episodes. We got remote viewing that we need to unpack. And then I started to talk about this, but after I realized that UFOs and the occult were related, and I was like, how are we ever going to understand this? I licked my wounds and I wrote the Alien Abductions, the Switch article, which I think brings that connective tissue in between science and all of those things. And then I wrote another article called Deconstructing the Woo, which is where I put down my ideas around how the phenomenon ends up choosing people for an encounter, how phenomenon encounters happen and why they happen and where. And that's a hypothesis. I think we can talk about that, and maybe we can even put it to the evidence and try to prove it. So yeah, we owe two of our next episodes. We'll do remote viewing, and then we'll do deconstructing the woo. And look, we tried to take some of your feedback and talk about it here. So I get it. You're saying, hey, you're just breezing over subjects and you're not diving in. And if you feel like these things aren't substantiated enough, go ahead and reach out to me, either through email, romax@14winds.com, or, leave a comment on the website. Either way, we do have a Facebook group. If everyone's on Facebook, I know you don't use it, but you're still on it. You're still on it, aren't you? I look at the numbers. I know those numbers. Everyone's on Facebook. That's why we
unfortunately. It's there. It's a necessary evil, I guess, these days.
Yeah, but everything we publish gets you'll get notified there if you want to track us there. Oh, and the YouTube channel. Yeah, we're gonna do some videos. All of the old 14 Winds episodes are now up on YouTube, and the first 5 we put a lot of work into, and we did a bunch of stills. And then we looked at some of the analytics and we realized that people were just listening to it. So
right.
We didn't do that for the rest of them. But maybe we'll do some videos if we have a good idea of something that's informative. I think what we're doing here is informative. Oh, shoot. Yeah. One last thing I wanted to talk about. So based on my own experience and based on some other hard anecdotal evidence like Chris Bledsoe, who I think we've talked about many times, I think we all agree that he's the most validated contactee. And what we talked about was that his experience is positive, and that's important.
Yeah.
And since we've said that, recently I know Tom DeLonge came out and he said, hey, anyone saying that it's positive, it's a huge red flag, and all of these things are bad based on everything I know. So that's cool. Now, he's in touch with the government, right? He's speaking and he's talking. He said that, and he literally said it in the same interviews. It's that he said this multiple times, that he has said that the government is doing all of this for our benefit and we're really the good guys and all this, and they don't want to tell us everything because they're afraid that the bad guys, who is the phenomenon, will know that they're plotting against them. That is utter nonsense. And
so wait, who said that?
Tom DeLonge. Yeah,
Tom DeLonge. And who is that again?
He's the singer of Blink 182, and his emails were caught up in the Hillary Clinton email scandal because he was talking to John Podesta, who was the chief of staff, about UFO stuff. Yeah, and they were talking about ways to get disclosure, and so he's been, incorporated into this military intelligence response, which makes him 100% an asset. And when you're an asset, you get access to information, but you don't know whether it's real or not. And then what he's saying is the threat narrative. So if he's talking to these government guys and they're telling him that, that's what they're going with. That tells us something. Mm-hmm. It's where we have to put our thinking caps on. That tells us something. That tells us that they're going with the threat narrative. So, and then as part of that, he says, yeah, and I think Chris Bledsoe is being deceived. Based on what, dude?
Yeah.
Like, you weren't there. He was
No.
there. And, you know, I'll take it further if they want to play this game. Like, look, Travis Walton, who was abducted, another one of the most famous abductees, he's talking about his encounter, and he thinks that those things may have helped him too. We didn't even mention that, you know, because we don't know. But he thinks that they actually may have healed him because he was too close to the craft.
Hmm.
So Carl Hignan said the same thing. He thinks that they did something positive to him. And then
Interesting.
it is very interesting.
Yeah.
There's another study, and I guess I'll find it and link to it in this podcast, but wanted to do more digging on it. But there's another study that people who have experienced abductions more than, I think, 10 times start to view their captors as benevolent. You could view that as Stockholm Syndrome, or it's something else. But we need to look at the information, and you don't just need to stop at influencer, which is exactly what Tom DeLonge is. You know?
Absolutely. Right.
And so I guess we addressed that enough. Like, on that last episode, I said people should look at the stuff he's saying. Some of the stuff he's saying matches up with us, and it does. So the things that he's talking about non-local consciousness, remote viewing overlaps, those are things that are part of this phenomenon. So those things I agree with him. The quantum physics aspects of this, the quantum entanglement, those are things that we've talked about. Those are things he's talking about. That's good information. This part, the threat part, I don't know. I will say, in support of it, 90% of what I know about this phenomenon shows humans being harmed, and maybe 10% shows positive interactions. But what incentive do you have to talk about a positive interaction with this phenomenon? What incentive do you have to come forward and be ridiculed? And you look at what the Bledsoe family dealt with, what the Hopkinsville family dealt with. What incentive do you have to talk about this? So we know that this phenomenon-related stuff is grossly underreported.
If you're too positive about it, then you run the risk of being too incense and peppermints about it. It's just,
what, incense and peppermints? I've never even heard that.
You know, where you're too like when someone's really into the Christian church, you know, they're like always okay. Jesus is with us all the time, right. You know, that you're not going to sell it as much as if you were saying, I had this experience, it was horrifying, everyone look out, you know.
100%. Great point, because the reason he may be saying all that is because that's their play politically. You know,
right.
Mellon is up there and he knows how to play the game. He may be saying the more we can amp up the threat narrative, the more we put pressure on the DOD to reveal classified information. That might be the play. And, right. You know, okay, but we're not doing that, folks. Like, that we're going to try to figure out the phenomenon on our own, and we all need to in the public, because this information that's coming to us, we don't know whether it's valid or not. And there's lots and lots of public data. There's just maybe not enough minds on it that we can really make progress, but I think we can. So, and if we had some money and resources, and you know, I hold out hope for that, honestly, because I actually think we could build stuff. I think we could build stuff to help people. And I think we could build stuff to find the phenomenon. We talked about how to shoot down UFOs, and we know how to bait them too, by the way. It's neutrinos. Right. And Elizondo said that. So, you know, look at the information that he gave. That's where I'm getting at. Neutrinos. That's how you bait these things. And so they're attracted to atomic energy. We know that they show up around power plants. If we really wanted to shoot one down in the public, we could.
Right.
You know, you want to play this game, like, hey, you know, just give us the data, man. And the stupid thing about it, and this is why everyone from the inside is saying this, the whistleblowers, whomever, is saying we need help. We need experts. You know, they haven't been able to make progress on this advanced technology, that whatever's in that craft, because they're not giving it to the public where all these great minds are. And people have a very naive view of what government science can do. You think that they have the best scientists? Who has more money? We do. We have the best scientists. We have the best analysts. And they have to perform all the time or they don't get more money.
Right.
The government doesn't have that. And I'm not saying that they're not great and that they don't bring in good scientists and get that sort of information sometimes, but ask anyone in the government. Like, they'll tell you how it all works, and it's slow. Like, and the people who are on the inside of these special access programs working on this UFO stuff are complaining. They're like, we need great minds, and we need a bunch of them. If they're not going to give us that information, we're going to have to go get it on our own.
Right.
And we need to start taking some steps toward that. I don't know how that would work, how the organization would work, but it has to be all public. It all has to be transparent. And just like these Nazca mummies, I think, are handling. Let's hope that that'd be a nice way to end this. Like, let's hope that this Heritage Ministry has finally said, okay, let's make this serious. And then we can move forward. So that's a good way to leave it till next time. And I guess we're going to talk about remote viewing. 14 Wins is back.
All right. 14 Wins is back. Well, that's it. It was good talking to you, Ram.
Good talking to you, man. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. All right. Take care, everyone, and thanks for listening.
Take care, all.